pending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Great Barrington Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. There's a lot of feedback here. If everyone would just mute themselves, that may help. Specific information for general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and our parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting may be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so by following the instructions at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so, despite best efforts, we'll post on the town's website an audio, video recording, transcript, and a comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Pursuant to Mass General Law 7C 38 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. So this meeting is being recorded by the town, by CTSB, by at least one media and other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items of those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. First thing on the agenda is the FY22 budget policy. Ann, do you want to walk us through that?
Sure, and I guess I'll just remind everyone we'll do a roll call vote on this. So at the most recent Finance Committee, we had voted on a budget policy, and I apologize that the budget policy I had was missing a vote that had been taken at the joint Finance Committee Select Board meeting that was January 27th, 2020. And so that would change the policy that said work to keep the overall tax levy as low as possible to the revised version of work to keep the overall tax levy. And let me just pull this up from the current language, to work to keep the overall tax levy reasonable in consideration of other priorities and goals. And this was actually voted on January 27th, 2020 by both the Joint Finance Committee and the Select Board. So this was actually something we had already voted on. However, also at the most recent Select Board meeting, the Select Board voted to remove from the finance policy, and give me just 1 second here, I'm going to pull that up, remove the statement that this is under strategic priorities, and I can, which would be to ensure public safety, ensure public health, maintain a strong local economy, strive for a high quality of life. And then there's a statement that reads, maintain, develop stable and healthy communities. And then we go on to seek environmental sustainability, ensure fiscal stability. And the Select Board felt that the statement, maintain, develop stable and healthy communities, was redundant with the other statements that came before and after. Am I summarizing that correctly for the Select Board?
Yes.
Add anything new. So, so I bring that for a discussion and vote to the Finance Committee. And do I hear any discussion in terms of removing that statement from the budget policy for fiscal year 2022?
Chair, was this brought before the Finance Committee or is this new?
This is new, Michelle.
This is Michelle.
Yes. So you may recall that we voted on our January, I think it was 16th meeting, to make no changes, and then it had to go to the Select Board, and the Select Board suggested this, voted on this change. So it has to be in a packet. I'm sorry?
Was this in a packet or was it part of the budget binder?
It was part of the budget binder, but it wasn't noted in the budget binder.
All right. I was I would like to, I have a problem with this because it seems like there are a lot of changes made since we met on the finance committee, and I haven't had a chance to review the changes.
We only made one change.
But it's kind of wordy. What Ann was just presenting was fairly wordy. And so unless you want to go through it one more time, Ann, and perhaps you could share it on the screen.
Absolutely, I can certainly share it on the screen. Absolutely. I have that right here. So, and this was, what is it, reasonable? Yeah. So it's this one here so this was, again, this we had voted on in January of last year, but it's actually, this was the change that the select board asked to make.
All right, was that change, you're confusing me, Ann, so I'm sorry to keep asking.
No.
You keep referencing select board changes. When were these made, at their last meeting or previous to this?
No, at the last meeting. Steve, what was the date of the last meeting? I have my screen, so I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. So, Michelle, what happened was you approved the policy at the finance committee. We were going to approve it at our next meeting, and we simply struck out the one line that says maintain, develop stable and healthy communities, because we thought it was redundant and quite honestly didn't make a lot of sense.
And that was on February 8th.
Thank you.
And so what you have highlighted under financial goals was a previous, it's just I'm looking at the copy I voted on at the finance committee.
Exactly, right.
So what had happened was under financial goals, what you voted on at your meeting in January was an older version. And that had been changed by both the finance committee and select board last year.
At a joint meeting.
At a joint meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure why we had two meetings about it. It's not last year, because we did make the initial changes. I think, Michelle, I think it was last year we made the initial changes, then brought it to the joint meeting, and that additional change was made. And this is the same thing that's happening this year, was we talked about it at a finance committee meeting, and now we're bringing it to the select board, who have asked for an additional change. This is the one change here.
I'm just uncomfortable because when we met, the finance committee met, we voted on a different version.
Right, and that's why I'm bringing this version forward with the change requested by the select board. So I don't know how, again, this, by the way, this was something that the select board brought up, and the finance committee might feel differently about this change. I mean, when I was at the select board meeting, I mean, I do understand that in some ways, because it sort of talks about maintain a strong local economy, strive for a high quality of life, seek sustainability, it does get at the maintain the stable and healthy communities. I mean, it's a lot of the same sort of language.
I'm more concerned about under the financial goals. Like I said, we receive a packet, I reviewed it, and a lot happens over a year, a lot of things change. So I'm an advocate for trying to keep our taxes down. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity with that last line now. So I just wish we had more involved discussion at the finance committee level on the correct policy.
Michelle, we did have a lot of discussion on that last year when we voted.
I understand that, Ed. What I'm saying is a lot occurred over the last year due to COVID and the pandemic. So my perspective has changed. And I think I can state that.
So Ann, your choice, since I want to move this along, is to have the finance committee vote on this, or you can choose not to, and the budget policy will be adopted by the select board and at a future time by the finance committee.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how the other members of the finance committee, would folks prefer to sort of put this off for a later discussion or to vote on it this time?
I'm going to make a motion that we accept the changes that the select board made and move forward.
Yeah, I guess I do want to, I hope I can second that, but I do think we could return to discussing the budget policy in general in light of, the world's changes in the past year. But I would second to approve the change proposed by the select board. Any further discussion? All right, this will have to be a roll call vote. So I'll start with Will.
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Michelle?
No.
Meredith?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So it is 4-1.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the budget overview. Mark, go right ahead.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Ann. Just bear with me here while I get my presentation up on the screen. And I should mention that as I'm doing this, that it's really nice to see some new faces, some new names in the participant list for tonight. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to jump right into our budget overview and priorities for fiscal 22. So first and foremost in our thoughts this year, of course, was COVID-19, since we're about to enter into our second year of a global pandemic, and this impacts pretty much everything we do here as far as how we provide services to our residents. But you'll see that this proposal remains optimistic that we'll return to some version of normal next year. The next bullet here, maintaining exceptional services. This is mostly a level service budget. You'll see as we get through some of the departments tonight, with a few exceptions that we'll cover along the way. Public infrastructure, capital requests were scaled back this year so we can catch up on some previously approved projects. We have a really busy construction season ahead this summer, spring and summer. But of course, some upgrades are always necessary, so we'll cover these along the way as well. Human capital, this is something I've been committed to and will remain committed to. By this, I mean that we budget appropriate resources to attract and retain qualified staff here in Great Barrington. And this is especially important this year, I believe, because we had some key department heads retire or resign, including our police chief, our highway superintendent, our wastewater treatment plant assistant superintendent, our assessor, and our longtime select board admin assistant, Helen, retired as well. And then finally, investing in our stabilization accounts. This will come up again when we cover special articles. And this budget not only proposes to invest $100,000 in capital stabilization for the coming year, but another $100,000 to make up for our investment that we skipped last year. We're also proposing to invest $200,000 in our regular stabilization account. And this is something that we have only been able to do once over the past 2 decades. Next slide is just an at-a-glance look at our revenues and our estimates for revenues in fiscal 22. And you'll see a 7.3% increase is expected. Expenditures. We have just another at-a-glance look here for everyone to see. And this, of course, I'm ahead of myself here. This, of course, is, where am I? Let's see. Just at a glance, look at our revenues and estimates for the coming year, our proposed expenditures at a glance for the coming year. And I will, by the way, post this PowerPoint on our website tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure that it was fresh content tonight. And then our town operating budget for the coming fiscal year. This is also some historical data, just so you can see how it's evolved over the past 5 years. And while the town budget is expected or proposed, at least at this point, to increase by 5.6% this year, the tax levy is only proposed to increase by 1.5%. And this is the lowest increase that we have proposed at this point in the budget, at least in the last 7 years. Slide 6, our proposed fiscal 22 appropriations. Again, just a summary of our budget for the coming year, town operations, and capital. So here's some historical data on our capital spending over time. Again, the last 5 years. And, I'll talk more about capital in just a minute, but scaled back version again this year. So some of our capital highlights for the coming year. Under buildings and grounds, we would like to continue our cleanup efforts at the Reed Cleaner property on Main Street, some various parks improvements, and what you'll see tomorrow night is a proposal to purchase and construct a municipal parking lot for longer term parking. And this is a lot that already abuts our current Castle Street parking lot. Some street improvements in engineering, just ongoing repairs, and then engineering funding so that we can continue to plan for and design future projects. Vehicles and equipment, you'll see we have 1 police cruiser on the schedule for replacement this year, some portable radios and laptops. As far as DPW equipment goes, we have a backhoe and loader, a sidewalk plow and sander, and a truck lift. And then one new item this year that we are proposing is to purchase and install a ticket kiosk at our transfer station, which would allow our residents to purchase disposal tickets right at the transfer station rather than having to come to town hall first on a weekday when I believe most of our residents are using the transfer station on Saturdays or Sundays. And then, of course, wastewater, some sewer management and maintenance planning, and some sewer manhole rehabilitation. Moving into our special articles, again, some of what you would expect and a few new ones. Our community impact funding, this is year 2 of this program, and this is funding that is generated from our local cannabis sales. Next item here, emergency medical services, $40,000, also year 2 of subsidizing our local EMS services. And this ask will increase significantly. We did receive a request from Southern Berkshire Ambulance in the amount of $112,000, but we received it after we finalized the budget. So we'll have to cover that one at a later meeting. $15,000 to fund our portion of the school consolidation study, Berkshire Hills Regional School District and the Southern Berkshire Regional School District. We have another vocational student and tuition and transportation for $65,000 this year. The police cruiser, you're seeing this again only because staff will be recommending a different approach this year for purchasing and borrowing, and Sue will elaborate on that once we get to that topic. Stabilization and capital stabilization, again, we're proposing investments in both of those savings accounts for the town. Not sure what happened there.
Mark, I had a question.
Sure, go ahead, Bill.
The cannabis impact funding, That seems low.
It is.
350,000?
It is significantly lower than the revenue that we generated. But we decided when we were developing this budget this year that we would propose a smaller amount and spread out that revenue generated over the course of several years to keep the program going longer,
Okay.
rather than funding programs just to fund programs for the sake of unloading the cash. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes, thank you.
And before I conclude, sorry, my last slide seems to be missing a photo in the middle here, but I did want to recognize our staff and just mention that this process, for them anyway, starts as early as November and December, and we spend hundreds of hours calculating payrolls, collecting estimates, meeting to review departmental requests, which, by the way, resulted in $220,000 in early draft reductions this year, and then finalizing the budget books and slides for tonight. So I just wanted to thank all of our department heads for their thoughtful proposals this year, all their time and effort. I also wanted to thank Chris Remble, who's on the call tonight, who, in addition to his own budgets, manages our capital improvement plan, and Sue Carmel, of course, who does the real heavy lifting with our budget to get us to this point. And lastly, before we move on, I also wanted to thank our Select Board and Finance Committee members who volunteer their time reviewing our proposals and participating in these meetings. So, thank you. There it is.
So before Mark moves ahead, this is a general overview. All of these topics we're going to go into detail over the next many nights. So does anybody have any questions now?
You are unmuted.
So, Steve, this is Tom.
Yes.
I have questions when we get to specific areas. Should I just hold off or?
Yeah, because we'll go into each area in detail.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mark, why don't you move ahead with start with the Select Board Town Manager as on the agenda?
Okay, so I'll get started with the Select Board Town Manager budget, and it will be under tab 6, page 1. And I'll just hold off for 30 seconds to give everyone enough time to find it. All right, so getting started, I should ask, would you like me to go through line by line, section by section? How would you like to proceed?
I think what we normally do is the highlights of each section.
Okay.
The major changes.
Okay, so highlights in the upper section of the Town Manager and Select Board budget for the coming year. The Select Board salaries, we did discuss this last year. We discussed a stepped-in approach to increasing those salaries over 2 years. This would be year 2. And the proposal that we're presenting is an increase to $23,500 total. And that would be $4,700 per member, which would fully cover the employee premium for a family HMO plan. So with a family HMO plan that costs the town $23,484 a year, of which $391.40 per month is the employee share, or the Select Board share in this case. This would allow Select Board members to benefit from our health insurance without having to contribute in addition to their service to the town. It also keeps Select Board members under the $5,000 threshold for having to enroll in our retirement system. So before I move on, any questions there? Nothing significant in the rest of the lines for salaries. You'll see, and I should just say this right up front, I think Sue's also planning to cover this, but I just want to mention that what looks like an increase of 4% in some of the salary or all of the salary lines for this year is actually only a 2% increase. If you recall, last year we had the first 2% in a contingency fund while we were negotiating union contracts. So they were not reflected in the town meeting vote. They were reflected in the contingency line of the town meeting vote. So what you're going to see this year will look like a 4% increase, but it's a 2% increase last year and a 2% increase this year. So moving down to
I'm sorry, Mark. This is Tom. Is it now appropriate, or do you want me to wait? I did have a question on the finance committee line, if we're there.
I don't think we're at the finance. We're still on the select board town manager.
Yeah, I was just looking at the row right beneath it. All right. I didn't realize we weren't done with the select board. Okay, sorry.
I think you're on the summary budgets. Are you on the summary page rather than the detailed page?
You are unmuted.
Tom?
What's that?
Are you on the detailed budget page or the budget summary page?
I'm on the budget summary page and under tab 6.
Right, so we're actually looking at the detailed budgets as page
Okay.
1.
All right. No, I'm okay with that page. Sorry, guys.
That's
No
okay.
problem, Tom.
Okay, so moving on to the lower section of the select board town manager budget, you'll see an increase in contracted services. And this line covers our consultants for specific projects, such as a salary survey or a recruiting firm. It also covers our PR. And you'll notice that a few lines down, our consultant line was eliminated and combined with this line. So it's actually not as significant of an increase as it appears. But this year, half of this additional funding is being proposed to hire a shared HR employee or a consulting firm with our neighboring communities. I had considered at one time proposing that we hire an HR professional for the town, and found along the way that a number of our neighboring communities are also considering HR and have recognized a need for HR services. So we've been meeting regularly and discussing this, and we think that we may be able to save money for all of our South County communities if we were to share an employee, at least in the beginning, to provide these services to the town. We're an organization of about 100 employees, and I just can't imagine a private sector business operating with that many employees and not having an HR director. So I think this is really important. And $20,000 of that particular line, the increase in that line is proposed just for that reason. I guess moving on down.
Hey, Mark, this is Tom again, if I may. Of that, on the shared services concept, would each member town that you're talking with share equally in the salary and benefits for this person, or is Great Barrington going to cover 90% of it or 70%? Have you worked that out yet or not?
We're still very early on in conversations at this point, and there are two options on the table. One would be to hire an HR consultant, which would not be an employee of any particular community. And the other option would be to have one of our communities take the lead. And I don't anticipate offering Great Barrington to be the lead on this particular proposal. We've been the lead town for transportation in South County, and I just would like to see another community step up and take the lead on this one.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding the numbers. So the contracted services from 21 were 20,000, and the consultant was 18. So that's 38,000.
Mm-hmm.
You had asked for 48, and then went to 40. So it's really just 2,000 more than what it was last year, and that would cover some of the consultants that we need in this potential of this HR
So I can clarify that for you.
Thank
The
you.
$20,000 of that funding last year was to fund our intern, Joe Grockmel, who will not be returning this year. So we will use that for other consultants and HR in this proposal. Sorry, I should have been clear about that in my earlier presentation. Nothing else significant in the lower section of the Select Board Town Manager budget. We did ask for a slight increase in advertising, and this is due mostly to the fact that we used primarily the Berkshire Record for advertising in the past, and that's no longer an option for us. So our costs by advertising in the Berkshire Eagle have increased significantly this year. One other,
But we did. I mean, I know that'll increase. Will that be reflected or offset in the increased fees that we're charging now for permits?
correct. We're expecting more revenue from that as well.
Okay.
And one other thing to mention here in this particular budget before we move on is the office supplies and copy paper. You'll see that copy paper has been pulled out this year and separated only because in the past it was combined with our office supplies, and we do all the purchasing for paper for the entire building. So we just want to make sure that copy paper is able to be tracked, and we can keep it separate from our budget so that if we go over on copy paper, we're aware of it at the time and it doesn't just absorb what we need for office supplies in this department.
So, and Mark, this is Ann. Just a question about the HR person. So if it stays as a consultant, then it would stay in this contracted services. If it becomes a new line that we sort of shared line, would you be coming back to the committees to talk about what that would look like?
Yes. So when we drafted this proposal, the conversation with our neighboring communities was headed in a direction of hiring a consultant. We've been doing a lot of research trying to find a company in Massachusetts that provides HR services, specifically for municipalities, and we have been unable to really find anyone to do that. So I suspect that we'll be transitioning back to an employee concept, and at that point, once I have a little more information, you're right, that funding would have to shift up to salaries and out of consultants.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the Select Board Town Manager budget before we move on?
Go right ahead, move ahead.
Okay. Next page, same tab, page 2, Finance Committee.
Yeah, and I just got a text that folks are having difficulty hearing me. Is this any better? Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I can hear you fine.
Here, Ann.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, so right, the Finance Committee budget, again, we had increased the, I'm actually going to start at the bottom because that's the part that's most relevant for me. We had increased the reserve fund. You may all recall anticipating this would be a tough year. So you'll see that's going back down to about 100,000. And then the dues and memberships and travel and training stays much the same. The top line, you'll recall we had the contingency for salaries of 128,000. And Mark has requested to have 60,000 in the contingencies for this year. And Mark, do you want to talk about the rationale for that?
Sure. Thanks, Ann. So this is something that I insisted on including this year for a few reasons. First off, repeating what I touched on in my budget overview, we need to be able to attract and retain qualified employees, and we've had a significant number of departures in the past year, mostly due to retirements in key positions. But the second reason is that, just elaborating more on replacing key employees, a couple examples are our police chief, our highway superintendent, and our assistant wastewater treatment plant superintendent all retired this year. And it's incredibly difficult, we found, to attract people for these positions. And it's even harder to bring people up through the ranks because some of these positions, such as our police chief, I'll use that as an example, at the current salary structure that we had, it didn't make any sense for a sergeant to apply for the police chief position because between the salary and the overtime, they would actually be taking a pay cut for more responsibility. Same with our highway superintendent and our assistant wastewater treatment plant superintendent. Both positions became available this year due to retirements, and it was impossible for us to bring people up through the ranks that are qualified to move into those positions because of the amount of overtime that they can make in a union position, which they lose as soon as they become a manager. So we had to make some salary increases in order to do that. And, while we did that, of course, as you know, once you make a couple salary increases, we have our highway superintendent and our assistant wastewater treatment plant superintendent making the same amount of money as our public works superintendent. So what I wanted to do this year is hire someone to conduct a salary survey for our department heads, compare us with similar size towns, similar towns in complexity as well, and have the flexibility mid-year to make some adjustments if needed. Rather than waiting a year and a half and coming back to you. So that's my justification.
Mark, I do have a question. So I guess my question is, would we just be looking at the department head salaries in this study? Or, is it possible that we're using overtime in a way that other towns aren't relying on overtime? So you're describing that because of all the overtime hours, people at a different staff level are making close to what the top people are making in our town. And I guess I'd just be worried that if we're just looking at the top, we're not looking at what's going on and why we're seeing this trend.
Well, for example, and I see where you're going. For example, the highway department. We can't control how much snow and ice we have. So someone with a CDL license, a driver, with the amount of overtime they can make, their base salary plus overtime pushes them up into management level salaries. And I just think it's been an issue for us for a while, and it's become a real issue, particularly this year. And I realize the salary adjustments are rarely received well. I get it. But I do think it's important to take a look at this and see if our salaries are out of line. And if so, make some adjustments mid-year. We may find that that's not the case. I don't know.
May I speak? My concern is due to the pandemic, there's so many people out of work from all areas of the job market, including the public sector. And I do think it's wise to have a salary administration review of the salaries. But if we were going to make some sort of decision tonight, which we're not, and to simply say, okay, we're going to increase salaries just because of the overtime of union workers, I wouldn't agree with this. However, I do agree with having a professional review of the salary administration of the town. I think that's a smart way to go. And as Mark said, it may It may say we need to do more, it may say, no, we're fine. But I don't care for the logic is just because somebody does a lot of hours in their union and we're paying a lot in overtime and that union person starts eclipsing a boss who's salaried, that doesn't make sense to me. It isn't a sound justification.
It's just the reality that we face. To bring someone up, to entice them to step into a management role, we are faced with this, and our salaries are all public information.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who can get their hands on a town report can see that there are union employees making up to and in excess of their supervisors.
Right, and I understand the math on that, but what I'm saying is I don't see that justifying increasing management salaries. I agree with Ann. I think it'll, again, going back to the idea of having a salary administration review, is that we have to look at the whole picture. We often point out that, the highway department because of snow, but there are other departments, what's going on there. I just know there are other public, other towns that are trying to control their overtime, and they're limiting salary increases. But again, I applaud the fact that you're looking at a salary administration review, so we can get some hard data on it, not just speculation.
That's the goal, is to just get some information from a consultant that can provide, like I said, data from comparable size and complexity.
Exactly.
Communities.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know that we'll have to be very careful and not just compare ourselves to similar sized Berkshire County towns, but also some similar sized communities in the Pioneer Valley, maybe out east a little further, and find a balance where we're not comparing ourselves to a community just outside of Boston either. We'll have to find a good mix of communities. So.
And Mark, these studies, you know of people who do these studies, or there's already protocols out there for what data to collect and what to look for, or how does it get done?
Yeah, we would probably just put this out to bid and
Okay.
see what we can find. But I can think of 2 companies off the top of my head, and I know there are several others that do similar work.
Okay.
I have a question. Mark, if there's consistently that much overtime, have you evaluated actually just hiring another person to take up some of the slack? Maybe they won't have enough to do all the time. I don't know but it seems like that ought to be weighed out and see if it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can talk to our department heads about, especially as they present their budgets over the course of the next couple of nights.
Yeah, because that's a lot of overtime.
But the issue with that is then you have the additional benefits, including retirement,
That's true.
et cetera.
Right, so you'd have to see if it makes financial sense to do that. But,
And post-employment benefits as well. So.
but we could look at it.
But even a part-time position, again, looking at all avenues on it, but perhaps a part-time position without benefits to offset some of the overtime.
Yeah, and I guess one other point I wanted to make before we move on is that, we're about to, we just did post our principal assessor position, and attracting qualified candidates out west can be challenging. And of course, now with COVID and the reality with our housing market, it will be even harder for us to do that. So that's something that I'm trying to keep in mind as we think about bringing people in from the outside as well.
Any other questions on Finance Committee Reserve Fund? Go right ahead, Mark.
All right, so next up is our finance director, town accountant, and that's the very next page, page 3 in tab 6.
Good evening, everyone. Just a couple highlights on my budget. As Mark stated when reviewing salaries, it will look like a 4% increase. It's actually on all 3 of my lines. It's the 2% for fiscal 21 and 2% for fiscal 22. So there really is no changes there other than the COLA increase. In the lower section, the audit accounting services, you will see an increase of $500. We are at the end of our 3-year contract with our auditors, and this is the proposed increase to enter into a new 3-year agreement. Contractual services, I had that line in there back in fiscal 20, removed it in fiscal 21, and I'm asking for it to be reinstated for fiscal 22. And what this money is primarily used for is at the end of the year for both myself and the treasurer collector, as well as the assessors, is bringing in a retired former Department of Revenue field representative who just helps us with reviewing everything before submitting balance sheet and statement of indebtedness and all of the year-end documents to the DOR. And the other 2 lines are level funded. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I see none.
No, I'm all set.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so next up is technology, page 4 of tab 6. I just promoted Amy Pulver to take that one. Go ahead, Amy.
Hi. Hello, everybody. So, let's see. Well, like I said last year, the biggest thing in this budget to worry about is the software. The annual subscriptions every year is typically a 5% increase. So that accounts for a lot of that increase there. We also, with COVID and the big push to bring everything virtual, I've been seeking out different software to try and improve our website, trying to think of it as our digital office for residents. So we're looking at a few different options there to try and help create a better workflow, which would help residents and department heads as well. Let's see. The one thing, I do have a change. I did get some updates this morning. I'm not sure if everybody knows, but we recently installed our new phone system. We've gone from a copper system to a voice over internet IP. So it was right in the middle of all the prices settling down. So I wasn't quite sure where the phone budget would be. But I'm happy to report that we will be able to reduce that. I think right now, I had it at 35, town manager had it at 32.5, and we can bring that right down to 20. So I got that was some good news from Verizon today. So that is the VoIP system. Those are the copper alarms, and as well as our wireless phone service, all on that. So that's 3 components there. Does anybody have any questions?
So Amy, this is Ann. I just want to ask, so we are going to transition over to this voice over internet IP phone system at no additional expense per year. Is that right? It's going to stay level?
It's hard to compare because the billing system for a VoIP phone system is much different than a traditional office setting. So in a VoIP system, you're charged for how many voicemail box you have. Different lines can have different levels of service. Those different lines of service have additional fees. So it's really hard to compare the two together. and we didn't move all the phone lines. We left the alarms on copper, and we brought all the voice phone numbers over to the VoIP system. So the Verizon bill typically was $1,800 a month before that. So now our Verizon bill is going to be about $375 a month. The VoIP phone system, I want to say, is about $975 a month. So there is a savings there overall. It's
Okay.
just, it's hard to compare apples to apples in that situation.
No, I think that's great that we can do this upgrade and actually possibly, as you said, have a slight savings, which is great.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Amy, can I ask about the repairs and maintenance? I feel like, I mean, you've just done a ton of upgrades, so I guess I'm just curious about that number.
So that is, a lot of that is, well, recently it's printers. Some of the printers that we've had, fortunately, we've had for 10, 12 years. They've been great, but they're just starting to go. So that's where a lot of that comes from. Random cords that we need, different peripherals. If somebody needs external hard drives, or say we put a phone system in and we needed a PoE switch down at the library, that kind of stuff. Or we needed to upgrade the Wi-Fi at the library, we use that. When we upgraded the Wi-Fi at Town Hall because we were having so many Zoom issues, that's where that money came from. So it's really just, it's some of the stuff we can plan for, but a lot of that is just something broke, we need to fix it. Sure.
Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, next up is our assessor's office, and we are without a principal assessor, like I mentioned earlier, so Sue Carmel, our finance director, will take this one. And it's page 5, tab 6.
Thank you, Mark. So again, not to sound like a broken record, the salaries just reflect the 2 years of the 2% cost of living increase. The lower section, and the only change on the bottom section, is contracted services. We increased that $5,000 to basically give ourselves a little bit of a cushion, considering this is going to be quite the transition year with having a new assessor, going to quarterly taxes. This will be our first full fiscal year being on quarterly, or implementing the quarterly system. And we are having a CAMA conversion, as the Finance Committee is aware, as we just went for a reserve fund transfer to get that underway. So that's why we're kind of giving ourselves a little bit of a cushion there, anticipating needing to use that money with a year that will be in flux.
Questions?
Okay, so moving on, next is our collector treasurer budget. That's page 6, tab 6, and Karen Fink, our department head, is on the line to present her budget.
Good evening, everybody. I have in here my main changes. The salaries are staying the same, with the 2% increase over the previous 2% increase. We have filled the parking clerk position with an impartial outsider, so I think that's gone really well so far. Getting down to our expenses other than salaries, our tax title, we haven't used it as much as we thought we needed to, so we've decreased that a little. That said, I have got excellent results with a lot of payments this past year with the low interest rates and all the sales that have been going down, and I've got quite a few people into payment plans, so we're cleaning that list up. But again, there's probably going to be some additions to it this year. The contracted services is jumping up mainly because of the change over to quarterly. And I'm planning on moving the sewer billing to be mailed out. We use this Globe Direct, which is a division of the Boston Globe. They print our bills out. I don't know if anyone noticed the last 2 years how much nicer they looked than what they were previously. They're easier to read. People could understand them, and they could send the correct parts in. So that includes the envelopes, the mailing. It's going to go up a little bit with our change to quarterly. We're going to have return envelopes for people because I'm planning on using a lockbox as well to save some time. And adding extra things into the envelope makes the price go up a little bit. We've also used our deputy collector to mail out our bills. By using these other services, it really has freed us up to be able to post payments and interact with people and really work on projects in the office when we're not printing out bills and stuffing envelopes. It saves us a lot of time. So the sewer bills, I'm assuming, would be about $4,000, and we're probably talking about $7,000 for the real estate and personal property bills being mailed out with the demands, and about $4,000 for the motor vehicle bills, and then the lockbox. I'm not quite sure at the cost, but I'm estimating about $3,000 right now, but it may be a lot less than that. And the postage is moving into there. We've kept the postage flat, but we have noticed a trend with COVID that because people aren't able to access the office, they're doing a lot more things online, particularly with the town clerk, which has caused them to have to mail a lot more things out, including the trash stickers. That's why I really think when you get to it, the machine down at the transfer station will be amazing. It'll solve a lot of problems for a couple departments. I think that'll be great. And the office supplies I've kept the same. The equipment maintenance repairs I put in here is to get a new mailing machine, because we do have a automated mailing machine. It does save us on the postage, 4 cents per item that we mail out first class. The one we have now is 5 years old, and it's kind of on its last legs. And because we won't be doing as much postage because we're outsourcing a lot of our bills, looking at a lower model than the one we have now, it's about a $1,500 savings if I went with the comparable model, and the rental rate in that is a little bit cheaper. So that's about $4,300 in that equipment and maintenance and repairs. Also covers my contract on my copier. And travel and training, that's just hopeful that we'll be able to go somewhere next year.
Questions? Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome very much. Thank you, guys.
Okay, next up is our town clerk budget, page 7, tab 6, and Jen Messina is on the line to cover this budget.
Good evening, everyone. I will start with the top portion. So I have had a few decreases. The first one would be the election workers from 8,000 to 2,500. There's a lot less elections in fiscal 22. In the current fiscal year, there's 3, and I'm going only to 1 next year. So there's a decrease in the election workers. The assistant town clerk, the reason for the big jump is because in fiscal 21, she went from part-time to full-time, but it was only for part of the year. So the fiscal 22 reflects the full-time for the whole fiscal year. So that's the reason for that jump. Pretty much the majority of the items down below stay the same, except the elections. That goes from 12,000 to 3,300. Same thing because have fewer elections. And the other supplies went up just a little bit, just because I didn't completely budget for a few small items in fiscal 21, with it being my new year. So I had to increase that a little bit. But pretty much everything else stayed the same.
Any questions?
It's not really a question, I guess it's a statement, with the assistant town clerk. It just, we talk about investing in human capital and looking and seeing that somebody who's working full-time is making less than $40,000 a year at town hall. Doesn't feel like we're really making that investment. I know that we're really trying to keep things tight, and I totally understand that, but I don't know. I just think that if we're going to be an employer that people want to work for and set an example, maybe we can figure out a way to do that all around the board.
Anyone else?
That's all.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is our building inspectors department, page 16, tab 6. And Edwin May, our building commissioner, has been promoted to present this budget. Just need to unmute yourself, Ed.
Hi, building inspector. We look like we're going to be level funded right across the board, with one exception. A little boost to Carolyn, the office clerk. Other than that, we're level funded. Are there any questions? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking at a lot of stone faces.
Yeah,
you
sorry.
were mesmerizing it.
I guess, Ed, I'm sorry, this is Ann. I guess I was just reflecting on Kate's comment earlier about the salary of the assistant clerk in the, earlier in the town clerk's office, and then our earlier discussion about looking at administrative salaries. And I guess I just want to say, I'm just wondering about looking at the salary structures in general, not just at the top, but also those who are on the lower end of the salary scale, and how it's all fitting together. Because I was thinking there's no overtime in these budgets, so we don't see the same issue. So I just wanted to make that comment. Otherwise, it looks good.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
All right, next up is our health department. And I'm going to go ahead and promote Rebecca, our health agent, to present that budget. It is page 19, tab 6.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. My budget is refreshingly simple. You'll notice a decrease in the overall budget, and that mostly has to do with the health inspector salary line. Unfortunately, last year, as you know, our previous health inspector passed away, and he was working for the town for about 12 years. So our new inspector is coming in a little bit under what Block left off making. And then jumping down to contracted services, it's a little bit more than what I have requested in previous years, and that's mostly due to the public health nursing contract, which has been huge in this past year. Typically, Berkshire County Boards of Health or the Public Health Alliance requests a 5% increase for the public health nurse contract annually. I haven't gotten an estimate from them yet for fiscal 22. They're quite busy, but I've anticipated more than a 5% increase for fiscal 22 to kind of make up for all of their added efforts with the pandemic. So that's where that increase is coming from in the contracted services line. Yeah, and if it ends up being more than what I have there, I'll come back before you later on.
Questions, comments? Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, next up is debt service, page 27, tab 6, and Sue Carmel, our finance director, will cover this one.
So you will never hear those words that this is refreshingly simple. I wish I get to say that. So the debt budget, as you see, is almost a 15% increase. Kind of to take a step back to Mark's overview presentation, although the operating budget is increasing a total of 5.6%, understand that our fixed costs, which will be the next three budgets that I present, the debt service, the health insurance, and retirement, actually make up 3.2% of that increase. So if you were to factor those out, our operating budget is really only going up 2.4% as far as non-fixed costs. So to speak on the increases in the debt budget for fiscal 22, the long-term interest and principal is a total increase of approximately $450,000. This is the result of the bond that the treasurer and myself took out in January. It was a $5 million bond, as all of you are aware of. Originally, when we were estimating what the payments would be for fiscal 22, it was actually anticipated to come in around $800,000. So because we were able to get that amazing interest rate, we were able to get this payment down for fiscal 22 almost in half. I know that doesn't seem, when it's a $450,000 increase, it still seems a lot, but really we saved quite a bit with that interest rate we got. The good news to offset that increase is on the third line item, short-term interest and pay downs. As you can see, I've reduced that line by $186,000. That is the direct result of us bonding the two outstanding short-term notes that we had. We do anticipate we will be taking out a new short-term note this spring, which would make the interest payment come due next year, but I anticipate that should be covered in the $85,000. As you can see, I was originally looking to have that at $95,000, but in an effort to try to cut back wherever we could, I'm hopeful that that will be enough and the interest rates stay low. And the other debt issuance cost is level funded to fiscal 21, excuse me.
And Sue, this is Anne. So my question is, and this debt service, this is mostly the capital expenditures that were borrowed to fund. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's for any past capital projects and expenditures that we have authorized at town meeting, and this is now paying for those projects. If you look at tab 4 in your budget books, you don't have to do that now, but if you'd like to review that for our final meeting on March 2nd, it lists all of the outstanding bonds that we currently have and when they come due. So that's kind of an important tab to take a look at that ties right to this.
Anyone else?
Okay, moving on to retirement, page 28, tab 6.
Retirement, again, is a fixed cost, as you know. The increase is approximately 6.7%. That is in line where the past 3 years have been an average of a 7% increase. You will also see the portion in the wastewater budget tomorrow night when we go through that department's budget. The general fund pays about 89.8% and wastewater's the remaining 9.2%. Medicare increase is a slight increase, and that was adjusted for the cost of living of 2%.
Any questions or comments on retirement? So on to insurance, page 29, tab 6. And Sue will take this one as well.
So the insurance budget, I know this is a very large budget. However, if you look at the bottom line, the total is a 2.2% increase. I'm very pleased to say when we first started building this budget, we were anticipating the health insurance to be approximately a 3% increase. During the time of working through the budget, it was determined that they will be level funding it again for fiscal 22, so that's great news. We have a slight increase in there, as we do every year. We have to build in a contingency for new employees and basing it off of family plans for the new employees. So that is what that increase is. I did jump around a little bit, but that was the biggest. The other lines, the other insurances, I have a spreadsheet that I am not sharing though, but the other ones I just put the workers' comp, insurance deductibles, general insurance, public safety, all of those I put in line with where the expenditures have been, and it was recommended by the insurance agent that we build in at minimum a 5% increase. They actually anticipated a 6 to 8% to build in. They don't have the rates set yet, but I was still able to come in under and still give us the cushion of the 5%. But in total, with the way I reallocated the money around, it's an overall reduction from fiscal 21's budget of about $7,000. So really the driver is the health insurance.
Questions, comments? Anyone? Seeing no one. I think it's been a good night, a good start to the budget process. It's we have a lot more to go, but I think we're doing well. Citizen speak time. Just raise your hand and you'll be recognized. There were 42 total people who attended tonight, including panelists at the height. Media time. Seeing no one, everyone enjoy your rest of your evening. We'll see you back tomorrow night for more. By unanimous consent, we're adjourned.
Have a good night, everyone.
You
Take care.
too. Be safe, everyone.